Hello everybody, we're continuing in our series of exam prep for the AP Computer Science A AP test. Going through this book, this is I think the fourth video in the series. We'll be doing chapter, what is this, 6. We're going to talk about iteration today. Okay, there's two kinds of iteration that we're going to talk through. The while statement is the first one. I'm just going to keep this here because these are my notes. I want to make sure we cover everything that the book says is going to be on the test. So in Java, a while statement, really easy. It's word while, some condition, okay, like that. All right, and this is a statement. It could be just like the if statement. If you just have one statement that you want to do, just one, you don't need these curly braces, so that's not very clear. But or you can have a block of several statements, just like the if. Okay. This condition, again, like the if statement, is a Boolean condition, meaning it's something that evaluates to true or false. It could be a variable that gets set to true or false. It'd be kind of dumb, but you could have literally true or false in there, and I'll tell you why that's dumb in a minute. Or it could be some kind of an expression like is Tuesday and balance is greater than 100, right? Some sort of expression that evaluates to a true or false condition. And what this condition does, it determines when to break out of the loop. See, when your code is executing, you're coming along, boom, 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 hits this while statement, and it's going to look at this condition and say, is this condition true? If it's not, if it's false, if, for example, if you just said false in here, that's kind of stupid because it means nothing in here would ever happen. It would just skip this whole thing and continue executing code down here. So if it's set to false literally, then why would you even have that in your code? That's kind of dumb. And so what it would do with this condition, it evaluates it, and if it's false, it skips over. If it's true, it's going to drop into the statement here, whether it's a single line or a block of statements. It's going to execute this code. Okay, when it gets down to here, it's going to cycle back up here and evaluate the condition again. Is the condition still true? If it is, it'll go again and again and again and again until finally the condition is false. And then it'll pop out of the while statement and continue with its day. Now this is why setting this to true, just like the word true, is dumb, because it'll come in here and it'll loop forever, because true is always true, right? So it's important when you think about a condition that you design something that changes that condition somewhere in this while block of code, right? Because if you don't, and it's true when you come into the while block and you don't change something in here, it will never stop, right? So you have to change something that affects this condition so that ultimately it will be true. Ultimately it'll be false and pop out. As long as it's true, it keeps going. Does that make sense? Okay. That basically is the while statement. And again, this condition is exactly like the condition in the if statement. It can be something simple, or it can be some compound thing with, remember we had these where you say X and N, Y, or, something, something, something. It could be, a whole bunch of these things chained together with the ands and ors, and maybe there's a not in here. It could be quite sophisticated. Or sometimes, I'll give you an example. You might say something like Boolean done equals true. I'm sorry, let's say it's false. False. Okay? And then in here you might say while not done. Do some code. So if done is false, not done is true. So it will come in here the first time and start executing the loop. So somewhere in here, it might be an if statement or some other things, somewhere in this code, you need to say done is equal to true. right? And when you do that, whenever, you might, like I said, you might have other loops in here, you might have if statements in here. It could be simple or complicated depending on your code. But at some point, somewhere, you have to say done is equal to true, so this loop will finally end and continue. That's a common kind of use case, and the condition here is very simple. Okay? That is the while statement. Let's see if the book wants to highlight anything else. I don't think so. It talks again about short circuiting. We talked about that in the if statement real briefly. If I have something, let's say X or Y, or Z, okay? Now, if that's my condition, these ors mean what? At least one of them has to be true for the condition to be true. They all don't have to be true. Some could be true, even just one is enough, right? So what short circuiting says is, let's say this one is true. Short circuiting is saying, I'm not even gonna bother executing all this or evaluating that. Doesn't matter. If this is true, we know that this whole condition will be true because these are all ors. That's what short circuiting is. And likewise, you can flip this around with ands. Okay. And this is just a review, so it's clear. Okay. Ands mean they all have to be true. So in this case, if this one is false, then we can just skip the rest of this. We don't have to, the computer doesn't have to evaluate it, because if this one's false, the condition will be false because they're not all true. Okay, that's short circuiting. And that works exactly the same way for your while condition. So it's consistent. If you figure it out for one, you get the thing for free. There's a term in your text here called infinite loop. You remember I said if you never change the condition and it's true forever, it'll just keep going around in circles. It's called an infinite loop because it loops forever, infinitely. Okay? All right. That is the while statement. Now let's look at the for statement. For statement is a more complicated beast. It's very powerful though. Okay, so, but don't get flustered by all of this stuff. We're going to unpack this and tell you what each of these pieces are. Just blur over this for a minute. You got a for statement, some stuff, and then again, like the while, like the if, you've got either a single statement without the squirrely braces, or you can have a block with the squirrely braces, several statements in here, and that will execute. Okay, now there's three sections of this for here. Statement that we have to look at. This first section here is the initializer. Let's see if I can spell this. Init. Okay. So there's going to be a condition that controls, just like the while loop, there's some kind of condition that controls how long we go around in circles in this for loop. Okay. So we're going to initialize some variable, in this case I, giving it a data type, int I is equal to zeros. It starts at 0. It's pretty normal, but it doesn't have to. It can be some other kind of data type. It can start at any value, doesn't have to be a 0. And then there's a condition here. Okay, and just like the while statement, this condition has to be true for the loop to continue. Okay, now remember what we said about the while statement. If the condition doesn't change at some point in the loop, it'll go on forever, an infinite loop. So we need something that's going to change the condition. Well, this condition depends on what? It depends on I. So something has to change I. Well, how about we have this here? This is a modifier function. Actually, let's see if the book wants to call it a particular thing. Incrementer. It calls it an incrementer. technically it doesn't have to increment, it could decrement. You could go from 100 down to 0. Okay, but I just call it a modifier. It's some statement that's going to change I. Okay? So in the body here, this is going to be executed 10 times. It'll go from 0 to 9. And each time it will increment by 1. Okay? Now in the body you can use I. This variable here, I, is visible inside this code here. So you can use I, print it out, do math on it, whatever you want to do. But once you end this block and you come down here, there's no more I. It just exists here, just in the for loop, because you've defined it right here. Okay? So again, we've got a chunk here, the first chunk, something that initializes, some kind of condition, just like the while loop, and something that modifies the condition so that it finally ends. Okay? Now, you can, I don't think your book goes into this, but I'm going to give this to you for free. These are optional. For example, if I didn't have this section, okay, the section has to be there, but it could be empty. It could just be, semicolon. So there is no I created. I have to come up here and say int I is equal to 0. I'd have to define it up here. Okay, so before we continue, notice if I define it outside the for loop, it's visible down here. When I defined it here, it's only visible inside the for loop. Okay, but then I can keep the I is less than 10, and I can put this in here, I plus plus. Okay, that's basically a while loop, isn't it? I've got something up here that initializes, I have a condition and nothing else. I have 2 empty sections here, and I modify I so my for loop doesn't run forever. I basically made a while statement. A while loop, sorry. Okay. I could put this here. That's kosher too. Typically we just do this. That's easiest. All right, and we don't have to worry about it. All right, and again, we're going to keep it simple because this is an introductory book, but these can get quite sophisticated. You can initialize multiple variables. It doesn't just have to be one. You can have a very sophisticated condition like we saw with ifs and whiles. And this doesn't have to simply increment. It could do all kinds of other things. All right. The one thing I will tell you before we move on, this is completely kosher. See what I got there? I got a loop inside of a loop. So if I was to say system out print I plus space plus j, something like that. Okay, the output I would get, let's see, I get 0, 0 first time through. This is I, this is j. Then I would get 0, 1, 0, 2, dot, 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 all the way down to 0, 9. Then I'd get 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, dot, 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 all the way to 1, 9, and so on. It would have this behavior because I have a loop inside of a loop. That's done all the time. Okay? All right. I think that's most of what we need to cover for the for loop. There's some review questions in the book. Yeah. We've just covered iteration, folks. While loop, for loop, that's pretty much it. Just make sure you change your condition. Don't have an infinite loop that goes on forever. Make sure you do something that ultimately sets your condition to false so that your loop stops. So in this case, I is less than 10. If you keep incrementing by 1, ultimately it's going to be 10 and stop. Okay? Thank you.